The officer fainted upon realizing the suspect's name was the same as her son's. The clock showed exactly 3:17 a.m. when Emily woke up, startled, once again tormented by the same recurring dream. In it, she saw her son Ethan, still young, running toward her with that smile that lit up her days. But before she could reach him, he always disappeared into a thick fog, leaving only the echo of his childish laughter. She sat up in bed, ran her hands over her face, and took a deep breath. 10 years had passed since that fateful night when Robert, her ex-husband, disappeared, taking her little Ethan, who was only 5 years old at the time. A heated argument over custody of the boy had ended with Robert making threats, but Emily never imagined he would be capable of something so extreme. The silent apartment on the 10th floor of a building in downtown Chicago was a quiet testament to her loneliness. The walls, once decorated with colorful drawings and family photos, now displayed only diplomas and awards that attested to her brilliant career as a civil police investigator. A career built, ironically, on the foundation of her personal loss. She got up and walked to the kitchen, her footsteps echoing on the cold floor. As she brewed a strong coffee, her eyes landed on the folder she had brought home from work. It was her newest case, reports of a young man who had been stealing fruits and food from open-air markets in the city's east side. What caught her attention wasn't the nature of the thefts, but rather the destination of the food. All of it was distributed among homeless teenagers. Emily opened the folder and began rereading the information. Witnesses described a boy of about 15, agile as a cat, who always acted at dawn. Some vendors even admitted to deliberately leaving some fruits in more accessible places, moved by his cause. The young man had been nicknamed the Robin Hood of the markets, and curiously, his name was also Ethan. The sun was beginning to rise when Emily arrived at the Brooklyn market. Dressed as an ordinary shopper, she blended in among the people already moving between the stalls. Her sharp instinct, honed by years of investigation, made her observe every detail, every suspicious movement. It was then that she noticed a group of teenagers discreetly approaching a fruit stand. Among the group, one young man stood out. He had dark, slightly wavy hair like hers, and a natural leadership style that reminded her of Robert. Her heart raced inexplicably. The boy organized the others with subtle gestures, like a conductor leading his silent orchestra. Emily felt something strange, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if every cell in her body recognized something familiar in that young man. Discreetly, she moved closer to get a better look. His movements were calculated, precise. But there was something more, a kindness in the way he treated the other teenagers, a genuine concern for the group's well-being. The young Ethan, as she would later discover, was not just a fruit thief. He was a protector, someone who had found a way to survive on the streets without losing his humanity. As she watched him, Emily couldn't help but think of her own son. Was he still alive? Had he become someone like this, concerned for others, even after everything he had been through? The next few hours were spent gathering more information about the group. She learned that they took shelter in an abandoned warehouse near the train tracks, and that the young Ethan was more than a leader. He was like an older brother to everyone. The local merchants spoke of him with a mix of admiration and concern, as if they saw something special in him that needed to be protected. As the morning progressed, Emily felt an inexplicable certainty growing within her. There was something about that young man that deeply intrigued her, something beyond the coincidence of the name and age. It was as if fate had orchestrated this encounter, as if all the cases she had investigated over the past 10 years had been mere preparation for this moment. Back at the police station, Emily requested access to all possible records about missing youths in the area. Her mind worked frantically, connecting dots, building theories. As she typed reports and analyzed documents, her intuition screamed that she was close to something important, something that could change her life forever. That night, upon returning home, Emily opened the drawer where she kept the last photos of Ethan. She stared long at the smiling face of her son, and then at the images she had captured of the young man from the market on her phone. The resemblance was striking, but was it possible? Could this be the end of her endless search? With her heart racing, Emily began to devise a plan. She needed to get closer to the group, gain their trust, and learn more about the story of that young Ethan. But she had to do it cautiously, without alerting him, without scaring him. If her suspicions were correct, she couldn't risk losing him again. The next morning, Emily decided to start her approach subtly. Dressed in simple clothes and carrying a basket of fresh fruit, she headed to the abandoned warehouse where, according to her investigations, Ethan's group took shelter. Her heart pounded as she approached the location, each step echoing in her mind like a drum. The warehouse, an old industrial structure from the 80s, had a melancholic air under the morning light. Old graffiti decorated its outer walls, but what caught Emily's attention was the organization around the place. Small improvised flower and herb beds grew in recycled cans, and an area was clearly designated for sorting recyclable materials. Before she could get any closer, a female voice stopped her. "Who are you? What do you want here?" It was a teenager, about 14 years old, with blue-colored hair and alert, suspicious eyes. Emily smiled gently, lifting the basket of fruits. "My name is Sophia," she lied, using the name she had chosen for her approach. "I'm a social worker. I heard about you and thought I'd bring something for breakfast." The girl, who introduced herself as Natalie, hesitated for a moment before shouting, "Ethan, there's someone here who wants to see you." The sound of that name made Emily's stomach churn. Seconds later he appeared. Seeing him up close for the first time was like a punch to the gut. The same green eyes as Robert, but with a determined expression. The same strong jaw, the same proud posture she saw every morning in the mirror. "Social worker?" Ethan asked, clearly skeptical. "We don't need help from the government. We're doing just fine on our own." Emily stayed calm, though her heart was racing. "I'm not here officially. Actually, I work independently. I heard about what you do here and was interested in learning more." Ethan studied her for a long moment, his piercing green eyes as if they could read her soul. "Why should we trust you?" "You don't have to trust me," Emily replied, placing the basket on the ground. "I just want to help. No strings, no reports, no bureaucracy. Just one person trying to make a difference." Something in her words seemed to reach Ethan. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice, or maybe it was that invisible connection that bound them without him even knowing. After a moment of reflection, he gestured for her to follow him. The inside of the warehouse was surprisingly organized. Clean mattresses and blankets were arranged in separate areas. There was an improvised kitchen with a stove and basic utensils, and even a space that seemed to be used for studying, with books neatly stacked. "There are 15 of us here," explained Ethan as other curious young people approached. "Each one has their own story, their reasons for being on the streets. But here we're a family." As Ethan introduced the space and the residents, Emily observed every detail, every gesture of his. The way he carried himself, how he cared for the others, how he organized everything. It was like seeing Robert in his best moments, before everything fell apart. A photo pinned to the wall caught her attention. It showed a younger Ethan standing next to a middle-aged man. "Who is he?" she asked, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "Raymond," replied Ethan, his tone subtly shifting. "He found me when I was alone, taught me everything I know. He's like a father to me." The mention of a father made Emily's heart tighten. Where was Robert? What had happened to him? And why had Raymond, this stranger, taken his place? Over the next few hours, Emily talked with the young people, listened to their stories, and gradually earned their trust. But her eyes kept returning to Ethan, searching for traces of the boy she had lost. Every smile, every gesture, every word of his was like a piece of a puzzle she had been trying to solve for 10 years. As the sun began to set, Emily knew she had to go. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she asked, trying not to sound too eager. Ethan exchanged glances with the others before responding, "If you want. But no empty promises, okay? We've had many people wanting to help only to abandon us later." Those words hit her like arrows. Was that how he felt about her? Abandoned. The guilt she had carried for so many years weighed even heavier on her shoulders. On the way back home, Emily battled a whirlwind of emotions. More and more her suspicions were confirmed. That was her Ethan. But how to tell the truth? How to explain the last 10 years? How to make him understand that she had never, not for a moment, given up searching for him? In her apartment, late at night, Emily grabbed her investigation journal and began jotting down every detail of that day. She needed to be cautious, methodical. One wrong move could push Ethan away forever. As she wrote, silent tears streamed down her face, so close, yet still so far from her son. At the precinct, Emily could barely focus on her routine tasks. Her mind constantly drifted back to the warehouse, to Ethan, to all the unanswered questions. Between reports, she discreetly began investigating the Raymond that Ethan had mentioned. "Emily, are you okay?" asked Samantha, her partner of 8 years, noticing her distraction. "You seem like you're in another world today." "I'm fine," she replied automatically, minimizing the computer screen where she was researching. "Just tired." Samantha pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "I've known you long enough to tell when something's bothering you. Is it about that case with the boy from the fairs?" Emily hesitated. Samantha was more than a co-worker. She was a friend who had stood by her side during the hardest moments after Ethan's disappearance. Still, she wasn't ready to share her suspicions yet. "It's complicated," he replied vaguely. "There's something about this case that won't let me rest." Before Samantha could press further, the phone rang. It was one of her informants with news about Raymond. "I found something interesting," said the voice on the other end of the line. "The man you're looking for often frequents a bar in Brooklyn. It seems he has connections with several groups of street teenagers around the city." After jotting down the address, Emily decided to visit the place. Charlie's Bar was a simple establishment, the kind that seemed to have existed for decades without any changes. She sat at a discreet table in the corner and ordered a coffee. It didn't take long for Raymond to appear. He looked exactly like in the photo, a middle-aged man, graying hair, a tired appearance, but with a sharp gaze. He greeted some regulars familiarly before sitting at the counter. Emily watched him for almost an hour, noticing how several people stopped to talk to him briefly, some handing him small envelopes that he discreetly tucked into his coat pocket. There was something about that dynamic that deeply unsettled her. Determined to better understand who this man was, who had replaced Robert in her son's life, Emily returned to the warehouse that afternoon. She found Ethan organizing an impromptu math lesson for the younger kids. "Sophia," exclaimed Natalie upon seeing her, "you really came back." Emily smiled, feeling a pang in her heart as she used her fake name. She had brought not only groceries but also some textbooks and school supplies. "I noticed you all study here," she commented, approaching the group. "I thought this might be useful." Ethan looked up from the notebook he was using to explain fractions. His gaze was still wary, but there was a touch of gratitude in his voice as he replied, "Thank you. We try to keep everyone studying even if we can't attend regular school." As she helped with the lessons, Emily tried to absorb every detail about her son. The way he furrowed his brow when concentrating, just like her. The way he gestured while explaining something, so similar to Robert. It was a sweet torture to be so close and not be able to hug him, not be able to tell him who I really was. "How did you meet Raymond?" she asked casually, as the other young people dispersed for a snack. Ethan's expression changed subtly. "It was a long time ago. I was alone, scared. He found me and took care of me." "And before that? Don't you have any family?" Ethan tensed up. "I don't like talking about it." "Sorry," Emily said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry." "It's okay," he replied after a pause. "It's just, I only have flashes of memory from my life before the streets. I remember a house, a woman singing me to sleep, a man taking me for walks, but it's all very confusing." Emily felt her heart race. Those were her memories, Robert's memories, of the life they had before everything fell apart. She needed all her self-control, not to reveal the truth right then and there. "Sometimes," Ethan continued, his voice low and distant, "I dream about that woman. She's crying, screaming something. There's also a journal. I found it years ago. It belonged to the man I think was my father, but I've never been able to finish reading it." "Why?" asked Emily, barely able to contain her anxiety. "Because it hurts," she simply replied. "And because Raymond says the past should stay in the past, that now I have a new family." At that moment, as if summoned by the conversation, Raymond appeared at the entrance of the warehouse. His gaze met Emily's, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something predatory in that look, something that made her question even more the role of that man in her son's life. "Ethan," called Raymond, his authoritative voice echoing through the space. "I need to talk to you." Before walking away, Ethan looked at Emily one last time. "Thank you for the books. You can come back tomorrow if you want. The kids liked your help." Emily watched her son walk away with Raymond, a mix of gratitude and worry in her heart. She was managing to get closer to Ethan, but each new discovery brought more questions than answers. What was in that diary? Why did Raymond seem so determined to keep Ethan away from his past? And more importantly, how to tell the truth without losing the trust she was so carefully building? The following week, Emily established a routine of visits to the warehouse. Every moment with Ethan was precious, a chance to reconnect with the son she had lost, even if he didn't know it. But her investigation into Raymond was beginning to reveal a troubling picture. During a particularly hot afternoon, while helping organize the donations they had received, Emily noticed something strange. A group of older boys appeared at the warehouse, talking in low voices with Raymond. Their body language was tense, threatening. Natalie, who was helping Emily sort clothes, noticed her interest. "They're Victor's henchmen," she whispered. "They show up here from time to time to talk to Raymond. Ethan hates when that happens." "Why?" asked Emily, her investigative instincts sharpened. "I'm not really sure," replied Natalie, shrugging. "But whenever they show up, Raymond asks Ethan to do some special favors. Picking up packages, delivering envelopes. Ethan never tells us what's inside." That information made Emily freeze. Her suspicions about Raymond were starting to take a more concrete and troubling shape. She needed to act quickly but carefully. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Ethan was sitting alone at the entrance of the warehouse, lost in thought. Emily, who was about to leave, decided to risk a deeper conversation. "Can I sit?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on a distant point. "Sometimes I come here to think," he said after a moment of silence. "To try to remember your past," Emily ventured. "It's strange," he continued, his voice almost a whisper. "I have these dreams, maybe memories. A house with blue curtains, a room full of toys, a woman, my mother, I think. But Raymond says I shouldn't trust those memories too much." Emily felt her heart tighten. The blue curtains. She still kept them, folded in a box at the back of the closet, along with Ethan's other belongings. "Why not?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "He says my mother abandoned us, that she chose work over family. But something about this doesn't make sense. In my father's diary." Ethan stopped abruptly, as if he had said too much. Emily had to gather all her strength not to hug him right then and there, not to shout the truth. "Do you still have that diary?" she asked gently. "I do," he replied after hesitating. "But I've never shown it to anyone, not even Raymond. Something tells me he wouldn't want to know about it." At that moment they heard footsteps approaching. Raymond emerged from the shadows, his face a mask of disapproval. "Ethan, I need you for a special job early tomorrow," he said, casting a suspicious glance at Emily. "What kind of job?" asked Ethan, his posture shifting immediately. "The kind we don't discuss in front of strangers," Raymond replied curtly. "Sophia, I think it's getting late, isn't it?" Emily stood up, feeling the weight of that silent dispute. "Of course, I was just leaving. See you tomorrow, Ethan." On her way home, her mind raced frantically. Robert's diary could be the key to unraveling the entire mystery. But how could she access it without raising suspicions? And more importantly, what was Raymond planning for Ethan? Back in her apartment, Emily spent hours rummaging through old boxes until she found what she was looking for. An old photo where she, Robert, and a young Ethan smiled in front of the house with blue curtains. Her hands trembled as she held the photograph. She decided she needed to speed up her plans. Raymond's suspicious activities, the special jobs, the control he had over Ethan, everything pointed to her son being in danger. Seated at her desk, she began organizing all the information she had gathered about Raymond. His connections, his suspicious activities, the mysterious meetings. The picture that was forming was increasingly alarming. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Samantha. "I need your help. It's about the case of the boy from the markets. I've discovered something big." While waiting for a response, Emily looked again at the photo in her hands. "I'll bring you back, son," she whispered to the image. "I won't let them hurt you again." The sound of a notification brought her back to reality. It was Samantha. "I found something about Raymond. You need to see this urgently." The meeting with Samantha took place at a discreet cafe, far from the police station. Her partner arrived carrying a thick folder, her face showing concern. "Emily, you won't believe what I found out about Raymond," Samantha began, lowering her voice. His real name is Raymond Miller. He has an extensive history of involvement with groups that exploit street children. He uses teenagers as intermediaries for suspicious activities, always keeping himself protected, always playing the role of their protector. Emily felt her stomach churn. Her suspicions were correct, but the reality was even worse than she had imagined. "There's more," Samantha continued. "I found records that he was in the same area where Robert was last seen 10 years ago. It could be a coincidence, or it could be the connection we've been looking for," Emily finished, her mind racing. "Samantha, I need to tell you something. That boy from the markets, Ethan, I'm almost certain he's my son." Samantha's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a message from Natalie. "Sophia, I need to show you something. It's about Ethan. Can you come to the warehouse now?" At the warehouse, Natalie was waiting nervously by the entrance. As soon as she saw Emily, she pulled her aside into a secluded corner. "I found this while organizing Ethan's things," she said, handing over an old, worn-out notebook. "It's the diary he sometimes mentions. I think you need to read it." Emily took the diary with trembling hands. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're different," Natalie replied. "You genuinely care. And something strange is going on. Ethan has been acting differently ever since Raymond asked him to do that special job. He came back disturbed, but he won't say what happened." Finding a private spot, Emily began reading Robert's diary. The first pages were filled with regret and guilt. "I shouldn't have taken Ethan like that. Emily was right about everything, but now it's too late. They found us and said if I go back, if I try to tell Emily the truth, they'll hurt our son. I need to protect him, even if it means keeping us away from her." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she read. Robert hadn't simply run away with Ethan. He had been coerced, threatened. But by whom? And what was the connection to Raymond? Continuing to read, she found an entry that made her blood run cold. "Raymond found us today. He said he can protect us, that he has connections. But the price? I can't let Ethan grow up in that environment. I need to find a way to go back to Emily to tell the truth." The last entry was hurried, almost illegible. "If anyone finds this diary, please deliver it to Emily Thompson from the civil police. Ethan, son, if you're reading this, know that your mother never abandoned us. We were the ones forced to abandon her. She loves you more than anything. Raymond isn't who he claims to be. He's involved with—" The entry ended abruptly. Emily closed the diary, her heart pounding erratically. She finally had the answers she was looking for, but they brought new and terrifying questions. Natalie came running back, out of breath. "Sophia, Ethan just left with Raymond and those men. He looked scared, but Raymond didn't let anyone get close." Emily jumped to her feet. She couldn't lose Ethan again. Quickly, she called Samantha. "I need backup at the warehouse now," she said, her voice steady. "And Samantha, it's time to reveal everything." While waiting for backup to arrive, Emily gathered the young people from the warehouse. It was time to tell the truth, to explain who she really was and why she was there. Surprisingly, many seemed to already suspect there was something different about her. "I always thought you looked at Ethan in a special way," Natalie said, holding her hand. "Like my mum used to look at me." The sound of approaching cars made everyone turn toward the entrance. Samantha had arrived with reinforcements, but there was no sign of Ethan or Raymond. "I got a warrant," Samantha informed, showing the document, "and we found out where Raymond usually takes the boys for these special jobs. It's an abandoned warehouse near the port." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. 10 years of searching had culminated in this moment, but as she prepared for the operation, a doubt consumed her. How would Ethan react upon discovering the whole truth? Would he be able to forgive her for not finding him sooner? And more importantly, would they make it in time to stop Raymond from completing his plans? The warehouse at the port was an old and imposing structure, surrounded by rusted containers and abandoned machinery. Emily, Samantha, and the support team positioned themselves strategically around the area, waiting for the right moment to act. Through a pair of binoculars, Emily observed the movement. She saw when Raymond arrived with Ethan and 2 other teenagers. Her son looked tense, uncomfortable. A group of men awaited them, the same ones she had seen talking to Raymond in the warehouse. "We need to wait for the right moment," whispered Samantha, noticing her friend's anxiety. "If we act too soon, we could put the boys at risk." Emily nodded. even though every fiber of her being screamed to run to her son. She had waited 10 years. She could wait a few more minutes to do everything the right way. Inside the warehouse, through a crack in the wall, she could see Ethan arguing with Raymond. "I won't do this," Ethan's voice echoed firm. "Using kids to deliver your suspicious packages is one thing, but this is different." "You have no choice," Raymond replied, his voice cold. "Or do you think I took you in all these years out of charity? It's time to repay my generosity." "Generosity?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You use us, you always have. I read my father's journal, Raymond. I know you were involved in what happened to him." Raymond visibly flinched at the mention of the journal. "So, you know your father was weak, that he was going to ruin everything by going back to your mother. I had no choice." "What did you do to him?" asked Ethan, his voice trembling with anger. "What was necessary," replied Raymond coldly. "Just like I'll do what's necessary now if you don't cooperate." It was at that moment that Emily gave the signal. The team stormed the warehouse from all entrances, catching Raymond and his accomplices off guard. In the chaos that followed, Ethan tried to run, but Raymond grabbed him, using him as a shield. "One more step and the boy gets hurt," threatened Raymond, but his voice wavered as he recognized Emily among the officers. "It's over, Raymond," said Emily, stepping forward. "Let go of my son." Ethan's eyes widened as he heard those words. His gaze met Emily's, and in that moment, something shifted in his expression. The memories that had haunted him for so long began to make sense. "Mom," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion and confusion. Seizing the moment of distraction, Samantha and her team managed to subdue Raymond and his accomplices. Ethan stumbled back, free from Raymond's grip, his entire world turned upside down. "Emily, you're my mom?" he asked again, now more firmly. Emily took a step toward him, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Ethan. I never stopped looking for you, not for a single day. But Raymond said, he said you abandoned us, that you chose the job." "He lied," interrupted Emily, her voice choked. "Your father tried to come back to me, tried to tell the truth. But Raymond stopped him." Ethan looked at Raymond, who was being handcuffed, a mix of anger and sadness on his face. "The diary, everything my father wrote was true." Emily reached out to her son but didn't come any closer. She knew she had to give him space to process everything. "I know it's a lot to take in," she said softly. "I know you must be confused, maybe even angry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away for not finding you sooner, but I want you to know that I never, not for a moment, stopped loving you or searching for you." Ethan stayed silent for a long moment, silent tears streaming down his face. Finally, he took a hesitant step toward Emily. "The blue curtains," he said quietly. "In my room. They were blue." "Yes," Emily replied, smiling through her tears. "You used to say they were the color of the sky, and you used to sing me to sleep every night." "Every night," she confirmed. "I still remember every word of that song." Slowly, as if testing the ground, Ethan moved closer. When he finally reached Emily, he hesitated for a moment before throwing himself into her arms, sobbing. The hug that followed was 10 years of longing, pain, and repressed love exploding all at once. Mother and son held each other tightly, as if afraid the moment might slip away. The days that followed the reunion were an emotional roller coaster. Emily managed to get court approval to take in not only Ethan, but also Natalie and 3 other teenagers from the group who had nowhere else to go. Her apartment, once so quiet and empty, now overflowed with life and young voices. "Are you sure it's not a bother?" asked Ethan for the 3rd time, as he helped arrange mattresses in the living room. "We can find another place." "This is your home," Emily replied firmly. "It always has been, and it always will be, and your friends are welcome for as long as they need." Natalie, who was organizing some blankets, watched the interaction between mother and son with a subtle smile. "I knew there was something special about you, Sophia. I mean, Emily. The way you looked at Ethan, how you cared." Ethan was still adjusting to the idea of having his mother back. Sometimes Emily would catch him looking at her with a mix of fascination and apprehension, as if he feared it was all just a dream from which he would soon wake up. One night, while the others slept, Ethan found Emily on the balcony, gazing at the illuminated city. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "I have so many questions," he replied, sitting beside her. "About Dad. About you, about everything that happened." Emily took a deep breath. It was time to share the whole truth. "Your father and I were very young when we got married," she began. "He worked as an accountant at a company, and I was just starting out in the police force. We were happy, especially after you were born. But then Robert started acting strange, worried. I later found out that he had discovered irregularities in the company's books." Ethan listened intently, absorbing every word. He wanted to report it, to do the right thing, but before he could, they found out. That's when we had that last fight. He was scared, saying he needed to protect you. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought it was an excuse to run away with you." "And Raymond? How did he get involved in all of this?" "From what we discovered in the investigations, Raymond was working for the people your father wanted to expose. He was sent to stop your father from coming back, from telling the truth." Ethan closed his eyes, silent tears streaming down his face. "In the diary, Dad wrote that he tried to come back several times." "Yes," confirmed Emily, her voice choked. "And Raymond stopped him. He used you as a threat, saying that if your father tried to reach out to me, you would get hurt. After your father was no longer around, Raymond decided to keep you close, to use you like he did with other kids." "I feel so stupid," murmured Ethan. "I trusted him. I believed the lies he told about you." Emily held her son's hand. "You were a child, Ethan. Raymond manipulated the situation, used your fear and vulnerability. It's not your fault." "What happens now?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "Now we start over," Emily replied with a gentle smile. "One day at a time. We have a lot of lost time to make up for." The next morning, Samantha arrived with updates on the investigation. Raymond had agreed to cooperate, revealing details about the network of child exploitation he ran. "We found documents in his office," Samantha informed, "including some that belonged to Robert. Letters he tried to send to you, Emily, but that Raymond intercepted." Ethan, who was listening to the conversation, timidly approached. Can I see those letters?" Emily exchanged a glance with Samantha, who nodded. "Of course, son, we can read them together if you'd like." Meanwhile, Natalie and the other teenagers were adjusting to their new life. Emily had managed to enroll everyone in nearby schools, and gradually a new routine was taking shape. "It's strange," Natalie commented during dinner. "I never thought we'd have this. A real home, a family." Ethan looked around the table at the faces that had become his family on the streets, and now shared this new beginning. His gaze met his mother's, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly at home. Later, alone in his new room, the same one from his childhood now redecorated, Ethan found something familiar. The old blue curtains, carefully kept by Emily all these years. "I thought you might like to have them back," Emily said from the doorway. "Of course, we can choose others if you prefer." "No," Ethan interrupted, holding the fabric tenderly. "These are perfect. They remind me that I always had a home even when I didn't know it." Emily hesitated, still unsure of the boundaries in this new relationship. To her surprise, it was Ethan who took the first step, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for never giving up on looking for me," he whispered. "I never could," she replied, kissing the top of his head. "You're my son, my heart. You always will be." The weeks went by, and the new family formed in Emily's apartment found its rhythm. The challenges were many, but they faced them with love and patience. Ethan in particular was going through a period of intense discoveries and readjustments. One morning, as they had coffee, Ethan found an old box that Emily had set aside for him. "These are your things from when you were little," she explained. "I kept everything, every drawing, every toy." With trembling hands, Ethan opened the box. Inside, he found childhood drawings, old toy cars, tiny clothes carefully folded. At the bottom, a photo album documented his first 5 years of life. "Look at this," Natalie smiled, peeking over his shoulder. "You were such a cutie." The photos showed happy moments. Ethan learning to walk, blowing out birthday candles, playing in the park with his parents. In each image, love was evident in the gazes, smiles, and hugs. "We were so happy," Emily murmured, sitting beside her son. "Your father adored you. On Sunday mornings, the two of you would make pancakes together, always making a huge mess in the kitchen." Ethan smiled, tears in his eyes. "I have some memories of that. The smell of pancakes. Laughter. How about we recreate that moment?" Emily suggested. "We can make pancakes for everyone." The kitchen soon turned into a culinary battlefield, with flour flying and laughter echoing. Natalie and the other teens joined in the fun, each trying to make the perfect pancake. Dad used to make drawings with the batter, Ethan suddenly remembered. Once he made a Mickey Mouse, but it ended up looking more like a flattened rat. Emily laughed, surprised and moved by Ethan, starting to share his memories more freely. He was terrible at drawing, but he never gave up trying to make you laugh. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Samantha, who brought more documents found in Raymond's office. "These are the last letters from Robert," she explained. "And also, we found this." Samantha handed Ethan a small flash drive. "It was your father's. It was hidden in a box of Raymond's documents." With his heart racing, Ethan connected the flash drive to Emily's laptop. Inside there was a folder with videos, moments that Robert had recorded during the months they were on the run. "Son," Robert's voice echoed from the first video, his image slightly shaky. "If you're watching this, it means something went wrong. I want you to know that everything I did was to protect you. Your mother, she's the strongest and most amazing person I've ever known. Never believe anyone who says she abandoned us." Emily and Ethan watched the videos side by side, crying and occasionally smiling at the shared memories. Robert had documented small moments, Ethan playing, telling stories, always ending the videos with messages of love and hope. "He really tried to protect us," Ethan whispered. "All this time I thought he was being selfish, but he was trying to do the right thing." "Your father was a good man," Emily confirmed, hugging her son. "He loved you more than anything." In the days that followed, Ethan began attending therapy, a necessary process to deal with all the trauma and repressed emotions. Emily also sought professional help, recognizing that she needed support to be the mother Ethan needed now. The adjustment wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, insecurity, and old fears resurfacing. But there were also moments of pure joy, of connections being rebuilt, and new bonds being formed. One evening during dinner, Natalie made an exciting announcement. She had been accepted into a youth apprenticeship program. "It's at a tech company," she explained, excited. "I'll be able to study and work at the same time." "That calls for a celebration," Emily declared, proud. "I'm so happy for you, Natalie." Ethan observed the scene with a smile on his lips. It was incredible how his family had grown, transformed into something new and even more special. "Mom," he called out, the word still sounding new and precious on his lips. "I was thinking, maybe we could use the warehouse for something good. Turn it into a support center for homeless youth." Emily's eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful idea, son. We can work on this together." "As a family," Natalie added, smiling. Ethan looked around the table at the faces that now formed his expanded family. The journey had been long and difficult, but he was finally home, finally complete. The project to transform the old warehouse into a support center for homeless youth began to take shape. Emily used her contacts in the police and city hall to secure the necessary permits, while Ethan and Natalie mobilized volunteers and social organizations willing to help. "We need a name for the project," Natalie commented during a planning meeting in the apartment's living room, now transformed into the initiative's headquarters. Ethan, who was sketching the layout of the new space, looked up thoughtfully. "How about Project Rebirth? That's what we're doing here. Giving a new chance, a fresh start." "It's perfect," Emily smiled, proud of her son's sensitivity. "It represents exactly what we want to convey." The renovation work on the warehouse began on a Saturday morning. Dozens of volunteers showed up to help, including Samantha and other police officers, local merchants who had always supported Ethan, and even some of the vendors he used to visit. "I never imagined that boy who used to take my fruits would become a community leader," commented John, the fruit stand owner, as he helped paint a wall. "I always knew there was something special about him." Ethan blushed at the comment, still adjusting to the praise and positive recognition. Emily, who overheard the conversation, felt her heart swell with pride. "He's always had this gift for caring for others," she said, exchanging a loving glance with her son. "Even in the most difficult circumstances, he never lost his humanity." The project quickly took shape. One floor would be dedicated to classrooms and vocational workshops. Another space would be transformed into temporary housing for youth in emergency situations. There would also be a community kitchen, a library, and a common area. During the renovation, Ethan found a specific corner of the warehouse that brought back intense memories. "This is where I read the diary for the first time," he told Emily, who was accompanying him during the inspection. "I was so angry that day, angry at you, at Dad, at the world, but something in his words, it was like some pieces finally started to fall into place." Emily hugged her son, still amazed that she could do this after so many years. "And now we're turning a place of pain into one of hope." Natalie, who was overseeing the organization of the library, caught their attention. "Look what just arrived." It was a donation of books from a local publisher. Among the volumes were several copies of stories about overcoming challenges and new beginnings. "We could start a book club," Natalie suggested excitedly. "Many of the young people who come here need not just shelter, but inspiration, stories that show it's possible to change their lives." News about the Rebirth Project began to spread throughout the city. A young journalist from the local newspaper showed up to write a piece about the initiative. "It's an incredible story," he commented after interviewing Ethan and Emily. "A mother and son separated for 10 years, reunited by fate, and now turning their own painful story into a project to help other young people." The article attracted even more attention and support for the project. Companies began offering partnerships for vocational courses, doctors volunteered for regular checkups, and more people became interested in helping. One afternoon, as they were finalizing the last details for the inauguration, Ethan found Emily alone in the makeshift office. "I've been thinking," he began hesitantly, "after everything is up and running, maybe I could go back to school. I've always wanted to be a social worker, you know, helping other young people in an official way." Emily's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Of course, son. I'll support you in everything you want to do. And there's one more thing," he continued, even more nervous. "I found some old photos of Dad among the donations. I thought we could put them on the center's wall, along with the story of the project, to show that everyone has a story, that everyone deserves a second chance." Emily hugged her son, moved by his sensitivity and ability to turn pain into something positive. "Your father would be so proud of you," she whispered. "As proud as I am." On the eve of the opening, the family gathered to admire the finished work. The old warehouse was unrecognizable, colorful walls with messages of hope, cozy and functional spaces, all designed to welcome and support young people in vulnerable situations. "It's amazing how things have changed," Natalie reflected. "A few months ago, we were the ones who needed help. Now we're here, ready to help others." Ethan took his mother's hand, squeezing it gently. "Sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves, and sometimes in the process, we find something even bigger than ourselves." Emily looked at her son, at Natalie, at all the young people who were now part of her extended family. Somehow, all the pain and separation had turned into something extraordinary. A mission, a purpose, a chance to make a difference in the lives of other young people who, like Ethan, just needed an opportunity to shine. The day of the Rebirth Project's opening dawned sunny, as if even the weather wanted to celebrate that special moment. The warehouse, now completely transformed, was decorated with colorful banners and posters made by the young people themselves. "Nervous?" Emily asked, adjusting Ethan's shirt before the opening ceremony. "A little," he admitted, smiling, "but it's a good kind of nervousness. For the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The ceremony began with a community breakfast, prepared by some of the young people already participating in the project. Among the guests was John, the market vendor, who would now be one of the instructors for the produce and entrepreneurship course. "Who would have thought," he joked, "that the boy who used to steal my fruits would now be my boss?" Ethan laughed, embracing his old friend. "You were always more than just a vendor, John. You were one of the few who saw beyond appearances." Samantha was also present, representing the civil police. During her speech, she announced an official partnership between the department and the Rebirth Project. "This place represents everything our work should be about: prevention, support, and social transformation," she declared. And it all started with an investigation that turned into a story of love and redemption. Natalie, now the coordinator of the center's educational program, introduced the first courses to be offered: computer skills, entrepreneurship, crafts, and job readiness. "But more than professional skills," she explained, "we want to offer hope, to show that no matter your past, it's always possible to write a new chapter." During the event, Ethan noticed a group of shy teenagers watching from a distance. He approached them carefully, recognizing in their eyes the same fear and distrust he had once felt. "Welcome," he said gently. "I've been where you are. This place exists to show that no one has to face their challenges alone." Emily watched the interaction with her heart overflowing with pride. Her son had turned his own pain into a force to help others, and that was more than she could have ever dreamed of. In the afternoon, during a break in the activities, Ethan took Emily to a special room he had kept secret. It was a small gallery with photos and stories of overcoming adversity, including their own. "Look," he pointed to a specific photo. It was the old picture of the three of them, Ethan, Emily, and Robert, in front of the house with the blue curtains. Beside it was a text. "This is a story of love, loss, and reunion. But above all, it's a story about never giving up. We dedicate this space to the memory of Robert Thompson, who gave his life to protect his son, and to all the parents who never lose hope." Emily hugged her son, too emotional to speak. After a few moments, she managed to say, "Your father would be so proud of you, Ethan. As proud as I am." "You know," he replied, still in his mother's arms, "I think I finally understood something. Sometimes the bad things that happen in our lives lead us exactly where we need to be, not to stay stuck in the past, but to use our experience to help others." The day ended with a celebration that brought together everyone involved in the project. There was music, food, and most importantly, a lot of hope in the air. The young people who were already part of the program performed musical numbers and shared their stories. During the party, Natalie stepped onto the small makeshift stage to make an announcement. "Everyone, I have some news. We just received confirmation that the Rebirth Project has been selected for a federal government support program. This means we can expand our activities and help even more young people." The news was met with applause and cheers of joy. Ethan and Emily hugged, sharing another moment of victory. "Mom," said Ethan, his voice choked with emotion, "thank you for never giving up on me, for continuing to search, even when everything seemed lost." "True love never gives up," she replied, kissing her son's forehead. "And now look at how many fruits that love is bearing." As the party continued, Ethan watched the commotion with a smile on his face. The warehouse that had once been his refuge on the streets had now become a beacon of hope for other young people. And he, who had once felt so lost and alone, was now exactly where he was supposed to be, by his mother's side, building a better future, not just for themselves, but for everyone who needed a second chance. 6 months after the inauguration of the Rebirth Project, the transformation was visible, not only in the physical space, but especially in the lives that were being touched. On a particularly busy morning, Ethan was guiding a new group of young people when a familiar situation caught his attention. "He doesn't want to say his real name," explained Natalie, referring to a newly arrived teenager who kept to himself. "Just like you when you first got here." Ethan watched the boy carefully. There was something in his eyes, a mix of fear and distrust that he recognized all too well. "Let me talk to him," said Ethan, carefully approaching the young man who was sitting alone in the corner of the library. "Hey," he began softly. "You know, this was my favorite spot too. It's good for thinking, isn't it?" The boy glanced up briefly, then looked back down at the floor. "It's quiet here. You can stay as long as you want," Ethan continued. "But if you want to talk, I'm here. You know, I've been in your shoes, literally in this same spot, in this same warehouse." This seemed to pique the young man's interest. "You lived on the streets?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "For a long time I thought I was alone in the world, that no one cared, that no one was looking for me. I was wrong." At that moment, Emily walked into the library carrying some boxes of new books. The boy watched the interaction between mother and son with curiosity. "Is that your mom?" he asked after Emily left. "Yes," Ethan smiled. "We were apart for 10 years, but she never gave up looking for me. Sometimes the people who love us are closer than we think." The young man stayed silent for a moment, then whispered, "Michael. My name is Michael." Ethan felt his heart tighten, recognizing the importance of that moment of trust. "Nice to meet you, Michael. Do you want to tell me your story?" Meanwhile, in the coordination room, Emily received an important visitor, the state's first lady, who had become interested in the project after reading the article about her story. "It's impressive what you've built here," the visitor praised, observing the young people in their activities. "How did you manage to turn such a difficult story into something so positive?" Emily smiled. looking through the window to where Ethan was talking with Michael. Love has that transformative power. When we channel our pain to help others, it turns into purpose. The visit resulted in an even greater partnership. The state would implement the Renassa project model in other cities. Ethan would be one of the consultants, sharing his experience to help create new centers. "See," said Natalie, hugging her friend after receiving the news, "now you'll be able to help even more people." That evening, during a special dinner to celebrate the news, the extended family gathered at Emily's apartment. Michael had been invited, and though still shy, was beginning to open up. "I've thought a lot about what you said," he told Ethan, "about the people who love us. I think I need to try to find my family." "We'll help you," Emily assured him, exchanging a meaningful look with Ethan. "That's what we do here. We reconnect bonds, rebuild bridges." Samantha, who was also present, raised her glass in a toast. "To all new beginnings, to all second chances." Later, Ethan found Michael looking at the photos on the living room wall, images that told the story of his family, including some of Robert. "Your dad. What happened to him?" Ethan took a deep breath before answering. "He did everything he could to protect me. He taught me that sometimes people make hard choices out of love. It took me a while to understand that, but now I know that every choice he made, every action was driven by the desire to keep me safe. Do you miss him?" "Every day," Ethan replied honestly, "but I've learned that we can honor the memory of the people we love by living the way they'd want to see us live. That's why we created this project, to give other young people the chances my father wanted for me." Emily, who was discreetly listening to the conversation, felt tears in her eyes. Her son had not only become a survivor, but also a beacon of hope for other lost young people. On the living room wall, among the old and new photos, there was a framed quote, words from Robert's journal that Ethan had chosen to share. "True love knows no distance or time. It persists, endures, and at the right moment, finds its way back home." As the night went on and conversations flowed, Ethan looked around at his unlikely family. His mother, who had never given up. Natalie, who had become like a sister. Michael, who was beginning his own healing journey. Samantha, who had helped make it all possible. Each person there represented a different chapter of his story, a piece of the puzzle that was finally coming together. A year had passed since the inauguration of the Rebirth Project. The warehouse, now a national reference center supporting vulnerable youth, was preparing for a special celebration. "Are you sure everything's ready?" Ethan asked Natalie for the 10th time, double-checking the event preparations. "Everything's perfect," she assured him, adjusting his tie. "Relax, you're going to rock the graduation." It was a doubly special day. Besides celebrating the project's one-year anniversary, Ethan and 5 other young people were graduating from the technical course in social assistance, the first step in their professional journey. In the packed auditorium, Emily sat in the front row, her heart overflowing with pride. Beside her, Michael smiled, now a transformed teenager after reuniting with his own family thanks to the project. "When I first met Ethan," Emily began her speech as the class godmother, "he was just a scared boy I tirelessly searched for. Today, he's a man helping others find their way back home. This is the magic of love. It doesn't just heal, it multiplies." Emily's words echoed through the auditorium as images from the past year were projected. Young people catching up on their studies, families being reconnected, dreams being rebuilt. The Rebirth Project had become much more than a support center. It was a symbol of hope and transformation. After the ceremony, during the celebration, Ethan took his mother to a special spot in the center's garden, a small memorial they had built. "I wanted to show you something," he said, revealing a new plaque. On it was written, "Dedicated to Robert Thompson, whose love and sacrifice taught us that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find our true purpose. And to all the mothers and fathers who, like Emily Thompson, never lose hope." Emily hugged her son, no words needed to express everything they felt. In that moment, they were just mother and son, united by a love that had survived 10 years of separation and was now blossoming into something even greater. "You know," Ethan said after a moment, "I found a few more videos of Dad on the flash drive. In one of them, he talks about his dream of seeing me make a difference in the world. I think in some way he knew I'd find my path one day." "Your father always saw the best in people," Emily smiled, "especially in you." The party continued late into the night, with performances by the project's youth and heartfelt testimonials from families reunited thanks to the center's work. Natalie, now the project's executive coordinator, announced its expansion to 3 more cities. In a quiet moment, Ethan found Michael talking to his newly reunited mother, a story that mirrored his own. "Thank you," Michael said, hugging Ethan. "You showed me it was possible to believe again." Later, when most of the guests had left, the family remained gathered in the garden. The starry sky of Chicago seemed especially bright that night. "It's funny," Ethan reflected, sitting between his mother and Natalie, "how life takes turns. A year ago I could barely believe I had found you, Mom. Now look at how many other love stories we're helping to write." Emily held her son's hand, feeling in that simple touch all the love that even 10 years of separation couldn't erase. "True love," she said softly, "is like a compass. Even when we get lost, it always guides us back home." Natalie, who had become an indispensable part of that family, smiled. "And sometimes, along the way, we find an even bigger family." Ethan looked around at the people who were now part of his life. His mother, who had never given up searching for him. Natalie, who had become like a sister. Samantha, who had helped make everything possible. The young people from the project, each with their own story of overcoming. All united by a purpose greater than themselves. In the sky, a shooting star streaked across the night, and for a moment, Ethan thought of his father. Wherever Robert was, he was sure he would be proud. Not just of him, but of how his story of love and sacrifice had turned into a legacy of hope for so many others. "Sometimes," Ethan said, his voice choked with emotion, "we need to get lost not just to find our way back, but also our mission in the world." Emily hugged her son, feeling in that moment the fullness of the love that had brought them together. A love that not only survived distance and time, but had transformed into a force capable of changing other lives. And so, under the starry sky of Chicago, that makeshift family celebrated not just a year of the project or a graduation, but the certainty that true love has the power to transcend any obstacle and turn even the hardest stories into testimonies of hope and renewal.